Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm JC, and today's video is going to be my masterclass experience with Shonda Rhimes, a collaboration with Cavanaugh. Um, I've been very excited for this masterclass, partly because I love Shonda Rhimes. I think of Shonda Rhimes as what I want for a television writing career if I were to be accepted into the television writing world. I have an idea. I have a few ideas for some TV shows, but I have one that keeps really sticking in my head, and I really want to get it out and see what happens with it. I know I'm probably way too old to even enter into the television writing industry, but nothing beats a failure but a try, and the worst they can do is say no. So I remember hearing Cavanaugh say in one of her videos that she was interested in taking the Shonda Rhimes masterclass but hadn't gotten around to it yet. So I reached out to her to see if she would be interested to do this collaboration, and to my surprise, she said yes. And if you watch Barrett Laurie's interview with me, then you know that she is my dream author to collaboration. So that is the second reason why I'm very excited for this video. We are also going to be doing a live stream as well to discuss and compare notes about what each of us got from Shonda Rhimes' class. So stay tuned to the end of the video to find out when that live stream discussion of Shonda Rhimes' masterclass is going to be with me and Kate. I wasn't able to include everything that I wanted to include. So I'm glad for the live stream because I'll be able to discuss some other things that didn't make it into the video. And yeah, without further ado, because it's such a long class, I will not be popping in the middle. I will only see you at the end. And this is Shonda Rhimes Masterclass. Enjoy.
I think the moment that I first really knew I wanted to be a writer was probably almost before I can even remember. I've always been a person who was a storyteller. I don't think I knew I wanted to be a television writer or a screenwriter, but I've always been a storyteller. It's how I was made. I feel like I was born a writer. The discovery that you can make a living writing is like, I don't know, it's like your birthday every day or something for me. Because I was a person who I was writing endlessly in my journal every day. I was also writing stories every day. I was writing every day no matter what. It was what sustained me. It's my air, it's my food. So then to discover that I could make a living at it felt fantastic. And that I could make a living at it in a way that I enjoyed felt fantastic. I wasn't writing stuff that I hated. I was telling my own stories. And how lucky am I to get to do that? And even when I was writing movies and not necessarily, a movie that I was thinking to myself, this is my life's work, I still was telling stories that I felt strongly about. There's a heart in the center of every story you're telling that has to be true, or else I don't know why you're writing. So for me, every story was a story I felt really good about telling. I feel like I'm at a stage in my career where, honestly, I'm interested in building the next group of showrunners and the next group of writers and really making it possible for people to have better careers and know more and learn from any mistakes that I've already made. Because A, I'm not going to do this forever, but B, what's the point if you're not passing it on to somebody else, frankly? And it's exciting to get to do that. It's also about the fact that, at a certain point you start to have perspective and can really look back and see everything from a different angle and sort of start to understand what works and what doesn't. And the minute that starts to happen and it stops being about you and it starts being about what you can give back, that's when you really want to do something like this. I'm fairly sure I have never gone into this much detail about my process. It's really interesting to get to tell all of this stuff. It's kind of the stuff I really wish that everyone knew, because I feel like it's so helpful. It's the stuff I wish someone had told me a long time ago. It probably would have made a bigger difference. I mean, it would have made things easier on me, and I probably would have been less afraid during a lot of the process. But it's also the stuff I want new writers to know when they come into our company. Things about writing dialogue, things about the way you lay out a story, things about character. There's a lot to learn here that would be really helpful. Most of all, a lot of the stuff that I learned about how to be in a writer's room, how a writer's room works, I would have killed to know that. And I'm going to tell you everything I know about show running, because honestly, that stuff, nobody ever teaches you. You have to learn that as you go. And if there was a way to learn that, I would have killed to know that when I got started. I want you to use this class when you have an idea, when you're not sure if you have an idea, when you're trying to take your idea and turn it into something, when you are trying to figure out what your script is going to be about, when you're trying to figure out how to structure your script. You can use it once you're at the rewrite stage. You can use it when you're trying to take your script and get it somewhere. You know, this should be something that you can use to refer back to. You can go back and look at it again and again as you work on your script at different stages. Frankly, I'm opening the doors to my office and I'm letting you in. And you're going to get to hear all the stuff that I never really ever tell anybody about the way I write. And I'm excited about that. My name is Shonda Rhimes, and this is my masterclass. I always say, film is for the director. It really is. The director makes all the decisions. It's the director's vision. What's in the director's head is what's on screen. In television, what's in the writer's head is what's on screen. In film, the director fires the writer. In television, the writer fires the director. That's the joke, which isn't really that funny if you think about it. Nobody wants to get fired. But it really is this medium in television where when I think to myself, I want it to look like this, interior operating room day, they build the operating room that I imagined. And that's fantastic. I think I love the intimacy of TV. We spend more time with people in their living rooms. My characters are in people's living rooms. People spend more time with them than they do with members of their own family. If you watched Grey's, you spent more time with Christina Yang than you probably did with some of your closest friends. So when she left, you lost a friend. And psychologically, that is true. Emotionally, that is true. But also, you went on the journey that she went on. You learned things from her. You were with that character. There's an intimacy there. And it means that the world becomes a little bit smaller to me. A television show, what's wonderful is that your character, your lead character, or your lead characters, depending on how you're telling the story, can go on sort of an endless journey. It's an endless adventure that you get to tell for as long as you'd like. I've been telling Meredith Grey's journey for 13 seasons now, and it's been going on and on and on, and so you get to watch a character grow and change and evolve. I think all writing is the same. It's not that the writing for television and the writing for movies is so different. I think any lesson I learned writing for movies is very similar to writing for television. Storytelling, the art of storytelling, is fundamentally the same, which is if you are not writing from character and what would a character do, and is this actual human behavior, then you're not writing honestly. It's not going to resonate, and it's not going to feel real. How you write a story is how you write a story. I think it's important to read, and this to me is a habit that I think is key. I think it's important to be current on current events. I read the news every day. Like I pick a newspaper. I don't care what it is. I don't care if you have conservative leanings, liberal leanings. I don't care what you're reading, but pick a paper and read it every day. Not just so that you know what's happening, but so that you start to make a story out of what's happening. Because that, honestly, often is such a great way to A, find little nuggets of ideas, but B, give yourself a sense of storytelling in terms of what's going on in the world. How are people reporting the same story differently? That's always fascinating because, once again, that's storytelling in a very different kind of way. And often those things end up being turned into somebody's show or story or whatever. And that's always fascinating as well. I think one of the best things to do as a writer, and I think a lot of people don't do this, is you better really know your television. And I don't mean like know your television history in a sense of like you've seen what's come out in the past 5 years. Like there's a lot of people who can tell you like, oh, I've seen Breaking Bad. That's delightful. And maybe you've seen The Wire. But did you see Gunsmoke? Have you seen The West Wing? Did you watch St. Elsewhere? Like you really need to have an actual knowledge of what's been on television before and why and what the good stuff was. And that will really give you an education if you're going to write television series. Go watch a bunch of really old television pilots and watch how television's changed and watch why. It's the same as you want to read everything you can get your hands on. I think probably the top 3 things an emerging television writer should do if they want to write a pilot and they want it to be good. Get your hands on some pilot scripts. Find the shows that you loved their pilot and you thought, man, if only I could have written something like this. Get your hands on those pilot scripts. They're easy to find now. Read them and then watch the pilots again and then read the scripts again and then really just start to dissect the pilots. What was the structure? How did they work? How many acts did they use? What were the page counts of each act? Why? If it's a comedy, how many jokes did they have? Every last aspect of those things is important. How do they introduce the characters? So dissect the scripts, dissect the pilots. There are things that you can learn just by watching that are not about copying how something's done, but just by understanding how something's done. Or discovering that sometimes it's really effective to have an episode where things are really quiet. It's just about watching and seeing what makes something good. People always ask, like, where do your ideas come from? Where do you get your inspiration? And for me, that is such a crazy question. I don't know how to answer it all the time. And I think it's because my ideas come from everywhere. Your ideas should come from everywhere. They come from a conversation I have with somebody. They'll come from a fight I overhear while standing in a coffee shop. They'll come from, I'll read some tiny little thing in an obituary somewhere and I'll go, oh, that's a funny little detail. It doesn't really matter where they come from. They come from everything. When I have ideas, a couple of things happen. I have a journal that I keep. I've always kept a journal. And sometimes I write them down. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I write the ideas down. And I used to do that a ton. I used to do it a lot. I don't do it as much anymore. What I have started doing is taking notes in the little notes section of my phone, which is surprisingly effective. Not just because you can dictate, which you can, but also because it's always readily available. And I'm surprised at how many times I write something down. It does not necessarily have to be an idea as much as it is a tiny line of dialogue, which is where I wrote Gladiator in a Suit. Or it's, just a thought that you had, like, why is this a thing? That's a place where you can sort of keep a running tally of the things that you might have written on little Post-it notes all over your house. There's a place to keep it all, and I like that. When I'm looking at an idea and I'm wondering, is this an idea for film? Is this an idea for television? Is it a movie? Is it a TV show? What you're really looking for is what's the end of the idea. A movie idea has an ending, but a television series has endless stories. You look at something and you go, what stories could we tell with this? What other stories could we tell? And you think like, oh, I can do this, I can do that. With Grey's, I thought, well, there's a million kinds of surgeries and there are a million challenges. And frankly, they spend 7 years as a surgical resident. So at the very least, I have 7 seasons in this show. That's how you know. It's not close-ended. You don't know what the end of the series is. You don't know what the end is exactly. For me, I know an idea is something real or possibly a series or maybe gonna be something when it's like a song that you can't get out of your head. So I'll have this idea and I'll think, well, that's interesting. And then it won't go away. And I'll wait for it to go away. I'll be really hoping it goes away. But then it won't. And after a while, what starts to happen is characters start to wrap themselves around the idea. And then now I have characters and this idea. And then I start to have scenes in my head and this idea. And then after a while, I start bothering everybody around me by pitching them this idea. And what's interesting about that part of it is when they start to ask you questions about it, you have to really pay attention to the questions, because their questions will tell you whether or not this idea is worth it, if this idea is actually something or not. And if what you're saying doesn't make any sense to them, you have to really think. But if they want to know what happens next, they're interested and they're intrigued. I don't know if there's a formula for what makes a great TV idea in terms of all TV ideas, but I can say that for me, and really truly any TV show, a good TV idea has to have a compelling character, has to have compelling main characters with compelling dilemmas. You know, even in comedies and in dramas, you cannot have a show that is about people who are fairly unoriginal. You've seen them all before, doing fairly unoriginal things that you've seen all before. If that's what your show is, it's not a show. I mean, it's a cliche. So you really want compelling characters doing compelling things in original ways, period. The way you know you have a fresh take is if it feels surprising. Frankly, when people are a little bit suspicious of your idea and they're not quite sure it will work, sometimes that's when you know you have exactly the right thing. Because everybody in executive land, in the money-making side, they always want whatever it is they just saw before. It's safe. So you just don't want to be safe. Is it truly original, or is it just a remake? I would love to say that commerce has nothing to do with my ideas, and I never think about what the network wants, and I just give them something and say, you'll put this on the air. But it's not true. Mainly because when I first started out, that's not how things work. You don't just get to write whatever you want and then somebody magically puts it on the air. We're not princesses. We're not wearing tiaras. It's not the world. We all have to feed ourselves. But also, there's something kind of great about the assignment of something. And the reason I say that is because as writers, I don't know about you, but getting me sitting down at my computer to write something in the beginning was always the hardest part of anything. So having an assignment of something makes things easier. Give me some fences to play in and I can play all day. I would say, what are the studios looking for? And you can, every year they always have their interesting ideas. We want a spy show, we want medical shows, we want action shows, we want this, we're interested in character this year, we want time travel, whatever it is. That's a little bit like a challenge, and if you're a competitive person, can I write the best one of those? If everybody's looking for a medical show, can I write the best one of all the ones they're looking for? If everybody wants a time travel show, can I write the best time travel show anyone's ever seen? It's a little frustrating sometimes because sometimes you don't want to write within those fences, so don't. But if you do want to and you can, then do it. It's smart if you want to make a show to think about the fact every once in a while that television is a business. It is, for me, most of all an art, but it is very smart to remember that for the people who are wearing suits, it's a business. What do they need? And can your art meet that business? Here's the difference between an idea and a premise. An idea is, what if I wrote a show about gangsters? A premise is really filling that out. It's, what if I wrote a show about modern day gangsters who lived in New Jersey and that gangster went to see a therapist on a weekly basis because they had problems? The Sopranos. That's the difference between an idea and a premise. And I think that makes it really clear, because the more specific the idea is, the more it becomes a premise. That's a good way to think about it. Think about just even journalism. Who, what, why, when, where, and how. If you can't answer those questions, you don't have anything to talk about yet. You really need to be able to say the who and the what and the why and the when and the where and the how. And as well, what are the central conflicts? What do the characters need? What do they want? What are they searching for? You should be able to tell somebody your premise in a couple of sentences and have it be able to be clearly stated so that they can understand it. You really want to be able to be concise so that when you're telling your story, you know what you're talking about. If you don't know what you're talking about, no one else will either. I think when you're developing a story, I don't necessarily think of it as, there needs to be this character, this structure, it has to be this genre. I don't think of it that specifically. I mostly, and I think that it's more organic this way, I mostly try to think, who am I telling a story about and what story am I telling? I look at it that way. And I really try to make sure I can tell a story. Everything is about the journey of the character. Who is this person? What journey are they on? And what are they supposed to learn? What do they need? What do they want? And what are we giving them? What are their obstacles? It's really about that. And then once you understand who you're writing about and what they're supposed to be learning, what do they want, what their obstacles are going to be, then you can start really thinking about how you're going to structure something. A story Bible is when you submit, well, it's not even submitting, it's creating a document, however many pages long, depending on who you are, that has paragraphs and pages on the characters, who they are and where they're going. It has pages on each episode. What was great about making those story Bible was that it really provided me with a template of what my show was. And it allowed me, before we even started making the show, to step back and look at it and go, okay, there is a template for how to make this show. I think it's important to know what you want to do and to do it, to have real ideas that are useful and usable. Frankly, you have time before the show starts to actually do that kind of research and to come up with those ideas. Once the trains start going, once the show has been picked up and you start production, it's way harder to come up with things. So be useful, use that time, do some real thinking about what you want your show to be. And frankly, be thoughtful about it. If you're going to submit some ideas and have some, be resourceful, come up with really good stuff. Show titles are very interesting. People feel like they really need to know what their show is called really early on. Every pilot I've ever done has been written and pitched, written, and shot as the untitled Shonda Rhimes project. Every last one. Mainly because it's too difficult to try to come up with a title. But I never can settle on a title until sort of right before it's time to start marketing the show. And I don't think it matters. The title of your show is not what matters. That's best left to the marketing gods, honestly. And like I say, there are things that I know I do extremely well. That is telling story. Don't spend your time focused on what the title's going to be, or I don't know, like what music's going to play or something. The story you're telling is what needs to be focused on. And I say that because when it comes to things like character names, don't be focused on those either. Don't get hung up on those things and let them keep you from writing or creating. I am a firm believer in research when you're doing your pilot to tell an authentic story. And it depends. I mean, there are stories where doing a ton of research is really necessary. And there are stories where doing a very small amount of research is all that you need. But it just depends on what kind of story you're telling. You have to really be clear on what kind of story you're telling and be okay with your level of authenticity. I think researching a project is really specific to what the project is. Sometimes it's just about talking to somebody who does the job or who's lived the life. there are resources. You can call up, there's a media place for people who are doing health stuff. You can call up the Television Academy and ask a couple of questions and see where they'll send you to. There are places that you can call, and frankly, honestly, sometimes if you just picked up the phone and, for instance, called a doctor's office and asked a bunch of questions, they'd probably be happy to help. It's very interesting how many people are happy to help you when you say, I'm writing a television pilot, oddly enough, just to give you information on what the world is like. I hope what people find in the characters that I write is that they feel truthful, that the vulnerability that they display feels like honest vulnerability, like it doesn't feel mannered and it doesn't feel fake, and that they say the things that people seem to be afraid to say in public, so that you actually feel like you're watching the private lives of actual people. That's the goal for me anyway. To have characters who seem brave enough to live their lives in front of you, so that you think you're getting a peek inside someone's personal life. You want to really feel like you're getting an intimate look at someone's personal story. I think when I'm beginning the character development process, usually I'm thinking about who my character is in terms of, first it's the really basic things. How old are they? What do they do? Where do they live? What's their income level? What's their education level? What kind of family situation are they in, and did they come from? And then it becomes things a little bit more interesting, like if they went to therapy, what would be found? You know what I mean? Like, what's their pathos? And also just, what don't they know about themselves? What do they need? What do they want? Who are their friends? I try to fill up their lives in a way. You really want your characters to feel human, to really feel actually human, for people to be so invested in them that they forget that they're not real. Find something really interesting and specific for your characters. The more specific you are with your characters, the more defined they become, and the more three-dimensional they become. It's really interesting when you watch some shows and you realize that for a lot of characters, things happen around them, but they don't happen to things. Try to make sure your characters are happening to things. They are the ones making things happen, for better or for worse. They could be destroying the world around them accidentally or on purpose. But if they're the ones happening to things and making things happen, then at the very least, they're active in their worlds. You really have to be paying attention to who your characters are. When I say you have to have compassion for them, you have to care about your characters enough to want to make sure that they're sort of doing okay. Yes, it's a little much to spend that much time thinking about your characters, but you do have to pay attention to how they're progressing in the world, and to not sort of look away and then look back and discover that they haven't been doing anything for 5 episodes, except sort of standing on the sidelines. I think it's important to be open to the possibilities of where your character can go and what your character can do. And if you're going to let your character evolve, one of the things that you really need to think about is how to do it naturally. You could do it in an episode and it could feel really natural, or you could do it in a season and it could feel really natural. But you have to figure out how to make sure that the moments that your character is experiencing feel realistic. It has to feel natural, and you have to have it be based in their character and not just for story's sake. I think it's important when you're developing your characters to really know what they want and what they need, which is sort of how I look at it. Which is, what they want is what they think they want, and what they need is what you think they want. What you think they should have. How you know what those things are really have to do with what story you're telling. So a pitch, for those of you who don't know, and why should you know, because they're the worst. A pitch is when you go into a producer or a studio or a network and you tell them the story of whatever idea you have. And it's usually, 5 to 10 minutes long, and you give them all the details of the show. And in television, they'll tell you whether or not they're interested in buying that show and thus hiring you to write that script or not. That is a pitch. Pitching is probably the single most important thing that you can do once you've gotten in the door. That is the most important thing you can do. And if you're bad at it, it is a giant challenge. So you really have to figure out how to do it and how to do it well. Oftentimes, what makes a really bad pitch are two things. One, no sense of structure. Two, something you cannot follow. If you can't take me from plot A point to plot B to plot C point, and I don't know what's going to happen, or I have no sense of where we're going or where we've been, that's terrible. Or just too much. Like if it goes on for too long and it gets sort of painfully long, you're doomed. You want to be able to get in, speak your piece, let them ask you questions, and then you can elaborate all you want to and get out. You start with the premise. You tell them what the pitch is about. This is a show about a group of young surgeons. Then you tell them what the world is going to be. You give them like a paragraph of what the world is going to be about. Then you introduce the characters. You tell them what the plot is going to be. Then you tell them the plot. Then you tell them what you told them. Then you tell them how funny it's going to be or how moving it's going to be or how great it's going to be. Then you tell them how many episodes you can come up with. Basically, like, this is an endless amount of episodes because we can do blah, 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 blah. And then you thank them and you leave. I think it's incredibly important to know as much as you can about your idea before you walk in the door and pitch it. You don't ever go in the door sort of vague. You have to be able to know all the details, but know which details to share. And then knowing all the details allows you to answer any questions they may have. For me, a really good pitch is about character. If you come in and you can tell me how the story that you're pitching is affected by the character or resonates with the character, I am there for you. Like I am with it. It's really hard for me to get excited about somebody who comes in and just tells me it's a detective show and she solves the crime and that's it. Well, I don't know what I'm supposed to care about. I need something to hang on to emotionally that I know is going to carry us through, and I need to be intrigued by that character. So you really have to bring character to me for me to be interested at all. I think it's important to find a way to relatably market the show to the person that you're trying to sell it to. Because that is, when you're talking to business people, that is all they're trying to think. How are we going to market this show? It's nice to bring them an answer to that question right at the beginning. You can walk in with a way to market a show and you have a good show idea, you are good to go. A 1 hour drama is generally 5 acts of a show. It's a 1 hour drama separated into 5 parts, probably about 55 pages, although they can be longer. I think my pilot for Grey's Anatomy might have originally been 72 pages long. They tend to be long, but between 55 and 60 pages long, divided pretty much evenly into 5 acts. There's sometimes a teaser for some people at the front. It's very clean. At the end of every act, you want to have something happen that turns the story, meaning that the story should then sort of head in a new direction each time you hit the end of an act. In Act 1 of your story, you really need to introduce your characters in an exciting way and set up your world in an exciting way. It should be visual, it should be intriguing, and it should draw the audience in. You introduce your characters, you set up your world, and you present your problem. whatever your problem is going to be. And then in Act 2, you really want to sort of step things up. You want things to get worse. You want the situations, and by get worse, I mean escalate. Your situations escalate. Things heat up for your characters, either in a good way or a bad way. You start to expand your world a little bit. You meet more people. You understand the world better. In Act 3, which is the center of your show, it sort of spans the right in the middle of your show, the middle 11 pages, I like to say. You want things to sort of start to peak. Things get really hot. Things either take a turn for the worse or a turn for the most exciting. At the end of that, the story usually turns in a different direction. I always like to say, like a surprising turn that you weren't expecting to go in. In Act 4, that's when sort of the ticking clock happens, when you know that you have this amount of time to do something. For many shows, when there's no ticking clock, it's really when the characters start to really reveal themselves as who they really are. You start to hear more about them. Somebody's secret comes out. Somebody tells you something about themselves. You become closer to them. And that sort of helps them. It's sort of the moment that sort of pushes them to whatever action they're going to take, which usually happens moving at the end of Act 4, moving into Act 5, which is when they really sort of hit their moment of victory. I believe that you shouldn't be writing your script unless you have an outline. So obviously you should know where every act should end. But even before you start writing your outline, it helps to have a rough idea of where you want your acts to end. And I always say it should end on a moment that makes people go, oh, or wow, or that's interesting. It just has to make them want to stay around and watch. If you have an A storyline, your A storyline is always the storyline involving your main character. Your B storyline is always sort of the secondary storyline. Sometimes your A storyline and your B storyline are equally as large, depending on what kind of show you have. Maybe you have a show with 2 leads. Or your B storyline could be a little bit smaller than your A storyline. And then you have your C storyline, which is, some people call it the runner, which is a smaller storyline that's not really, going to overtake any story. It could be 3 scenes. It could be 5 scenes. It could be just be a little tiny thing. It could be a couple of lines of dialogue and, every once in a while. The A storyline is really the story you're telling in your show. So that storyline, obviously, there's at least a scene and act. And I say that because sometimes people have really long scenes in their show, so I don't want to tell you have to have like 3 scenes and an act of that. If you have really long scenes in your show, maybe you only have a scene and act because it's 5 pages long or whatever. But you at least have a scene and act, possibly 2, possibly 3, but whatever they are, they further that A story. Your B story, 1 scene and act, for sure. That's just happening, helping that story along. Your C story, maybe 3 scenes total the entire episode. The smart way to go is to try to make your A story and your B story and your C story intersect so that you're having a scene that functions for all 3 of them. But you really want to make sure that when you're telling your story, you are servicing the story that you need to tell and you're not losing it somewhere, which I think I also see very often in people's scripts. They're telling a lovely story about their main character and then suddenly they disappear for an entire act, like they've forgotten that they were telling that story. Structuring your script really means making sure that you are servicing the story you are trying to tell. I definitely have an incubation period with everything, not just every show idea, every script I'm supposed to write, every scene I'm supposed to write. I sort of knock it around in my head until I know. There aren't checklists that I go through in my head to say, am I ready to write this story? There aren't rules that I follow, that very specific rules. Writing doesn't work that way. For me, I like to let an idea simmer in my head until either I can't take it anymore or I've been given a deadline for something. Deadlines are wonderful for making you get your act together. And then I just start writing. To me, the process of writing a drama goes like this. You have an idea, you turn that into a premise, you do a bunch of research, you've really thought about your characters, you feel sort of ready to start writing. That's the point at which I think you write a beat sheet. And a beat sheet is where you decide what all the beats of your story are going to be. A beat sheet really is a precursor to an outline. You write your beat sheet, that beat sheet becomes an outline, the outline becomes your pilot. Having a beat sheet is a way of knowing what your moments are going to be, what the important moments are going to be. From there, you need to decide what your scenes are. From your scenes, you decide what your outline is. So the beat sheet's really, after you've decided what your story is, it's your first way into your story. It's your first way of deciding what your story is going to be. Your outline can be as detailed as you want it to be. Some people write outlines that are 25, 30 pages long. Those are very intense outlines, but they make writing a script very easy. Some people write very brief outlines that are like 5 pages long, that are, a page and act. It just depends on who you are and how you're going to do it. The more detailed your outline, the better shape you'll be in. To just throw yourself in and write a script is harder simply because you don't know where you're going and you don't know what you're doing. And you don't have a compass to get you there. Having a guideline saves you when you decide, I have no idea what happens next and I'm exhausted and I don't want to do this anymore. Every pilot is different. Every pilot has incredibly different elements. Every pilot, especially now with so many shows on the air, there is no sort of one pilot, which is really amazing and great. You can do almost anything. All bets are off. However, I think every pilot needs to have compelling characters, a compelling story, compelling dialogue, a great opening, something that's really going to pull the audience in. And you need an ending that suggests that what's to come is going to be interesting as well. And you really need to think about those things when you're doing it. What I think is interesting about the shows, I don't know if you'll notice, all of the shows have built into them a new person, I like to say, like a person who represents us. You as a viewer, the new person in the world, so that we have someone who does not know what's going on when we start a pilot. For me, I found it's a very effective way. You have somebody who's walking through the world who does not know what the world is and therefore needs things explained to them. Maybe not in big giant chunks, but there are things that they don't understand, and in order for them to move forward in the story, those things have to be explained. It helps because it makes it feel like we're not stopping to explain things to the audience. We're just telling the silly girl who doesn't know what's happening or the person who needs to go and do something what it is that's happening. And it makes us feel a little bit smarter and a little bit more safe as an audience because we're with the characters on their journey versus behind them. Well, dialogue is almost everything. I think what a character says and what a character does not say tells you everything you need to know when you're watching something. And so when you're writing something, you really want to be careful about the words you choose. I'm very excited right now about shows where there are scenes in which everything is conveyed, but no one has said a word. There's a lot of really good stuff out there right now. I think you should just watch a bunch of different shows and see how they use dialogue and pay attention to what feels real and what feels stilted. Pay attention to those moments when you think, my God, everyone's telling me exactly how they feel. And instead of showing me, and see how that engages you or disengages you from a show. I try really hard to think of my dialogue as being the conversations that real people have. I think you have to, if you're looking to make your dialogue sound authentic, if you want your dialogue to have a real quality that doesn't feel cliched or like what I call TV talk, I'm always saying that sounds like TV. If you don't want it to sound like TV, really listen to the conversations of people around you. become an eavesdropper. Just do it. First of all, it's incredibly fun. But second of all, you'll start to hear how people talk. People don't talk in complete sentences. People don't always know exactly what they're going to say. People use the wrong words. People drop out. People talk over one another. And people say some really crazy stuff sometimes. Nobody says all the perfect things at all the perfect times. I think when you're writing dialogue, you shouldn't be trying to write like anyone, and you shouldn't be thinking every character needs to sound like me. It doesn't have to be your own voice. It just has to be a true voice. When you're thinking about your characters, when you're thinking about who a character is, you have to think about who your characters are and make the dialogue fit the personalities that you've given your characters. There are two ways that I sort of hear my scripts. One, when I'm writing a script, I say all the dialogue out loud while I'm writing it. So basically, I'm acting the entire script out as I'm doing it. I can't hear it, but the poor people who are sitting right outside my office can hear it. So they've experienced this terrible acting that I've been doing. I do it because it's fun, but I also do it because it's how I know the scenes are working. It does allow me to feel my way through the show. I get to stand in the character's shoes a little bit more. It's how I know the pacing feels right. It's how I know the dialogue is right. It's how I know if a fight feels true or an emotional monologue is actually emotional. It's how I know if something is funny or not. And to me, if I can't say it out loud and have it feel like natural conversation, then I know there's a problem. Hearing a script somehow brings it to life in a way and makes it more three-dimensional for me. And I can very quickly tell you what's wrong with it, much more so than if I'm just reading something on a page. When you're going through your script and you're looking for things to cut, I often try to cut the things that don't affect your plot and don't affect your character arc. If you're telling a story about solving a case, if there's a case involved in your show, you can't cut anything that requires you to solve the case, obviously, or your audience won't understand what's going on. You have to really think about what are the things that are most important. If this wasn't in the show, could the story still be told? Which means that what you end up cutting are your darlings, because that's why they're there. When I write a draft of a pilot and I'm looking for notes, it's nice to have someone step outside of what you're doing and see what's going on. I think it's really important to not apologize or explain or discuss your script before you give it to somebody, because then you're already handing them a preconceived notion of something. I don't even say it's about blank. I just say, here's a script, because otherwise you're not getting a true reading. So when you hand someone a script, you want to hand them your script to read with as blank a slate as possible. Don't apologize. Don't ask for, don't say, I'm so sorry, it's not complete, or I'm not sure it's going to be good enough. Don't give them information about it. Don't tell them what it's about. Don't give them your opinions. Don't ask them to look for specific things. Just hand it over. And then when they're done reading it, ask them what they understood. Ask them what they thought it was about. Ask them what was confusing. And then listen to what they have to say without answering their notes with your answers. I think it's really important when people give you notes to not say, well, I did that because blah, 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 or that happened because blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. If somebody is giving you a note, what they're really saying is, I didn't understand why you did something. A note means whatever you did wasn't clear. It doesn't mean, your idea is not a good one, or, this doesn't work. They're not saying you're stupid. They just mean whatever you did wasn't clear. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't stick to your guns on the creative idea behind it. It just means you need to make it clearer so that they understand it. I think every note you get has to come down to, what don't they understand about my script? The thing about your pilot and when you're planning a series, the thing that you really need to understand and know is that in the first season of your show, you made this pilot, and then you get to episode 2, and a lot of people don't understand what episode 2 is. Episode 2 is just episode 1 all over again. You don't make some completely different show. You basically need to reiterate what episode 1 was in a new way, but it's still episode 1 all over again. Don't veer off course. Don't go in a whole new direction. It's the same show all over again. You need to do that so that people understand what they're watching and so they feel like they can trust what they've seen and that they want to come back. When you make a show, you promise the audience something. You promise the audience that they're going to see a show about a DC fixer who is involved in a scandalous relationship with the President of the United States. You need to fulfill the promise of that show every week. You can't take that away from them. You can't deny them that. You can't suddenly not show them that show. People want their promise fulfilled. People watch 1 out of every 4 episodes that you create, that you write, so they don't see every single thing sometimes. And you want to make sure that they know what they're watching and that they love it enough to go back and binge watch. So that they're there for you. I think this might be one of my most important points, so I'm going to sit up for it. If you put something in your show, there better be a reason for it. I don't care what it is. You don't put something in your show for no reason whatsoever. I watch this happen again and again, and it drives me crazy. Stories have to have a reason, and the things that you use in your stories have to be there for a reason. Everything should exist for a point. You know, the planting of something in a story, the appearance of something, the planting of something in a story, and the payoff of something in a story are kind of what I live for. If you bring something in, if you plant something in your show, it better pay off. It's also just a really good way of making your story feel like it has a point. Even when you're having a hard time figuring out every aspect of it, it gives you a shape. When I'm thinking about how to plan out my series, when I'm thinking about Grace, when I'm thinking about Scandal, I don't know that I'm thinking this is what I want the audience to get or this is what I'm trying to convey. I think I'm mostly thinking about here's the story I want to tell. Here's what I need to happen to these people. You know, the more you think of your characters as actual people who have needs and less as plot devices, the better off you're going to be. They're not devices to deliver a message to the audience. They are people who have to go on a journey. There's a lot of people who write all of their plot points out, but they can't tell you why their characters are doing anything that they're doing. And without that character motivation, you have no story. I think for myself when I'm watching shows, I get excited for the same reason I get excited writing shows. I get excited by the vulnerabilities of other characters, by the secrets they're keeping, by the way a story is told, by the moments where the thing that people have been hiding and holding on to, by the moments when those things explode. I think that when you're with characters and you're watching them on a journey and you're watching them head towards something and then unexpectedly things unfold, those are the things that you live for when you're watching a show. So to me, character is the reasons why people do things that also make them feel natural and not like a cliched plot point. Rules to succeed in a writer's room. If you're new in a writer's room and you don't know what to do and you don't know what to say, 1, be the person who holds the marker and stands at the board. That is always a great way to go because it makes you seem energetic and like you're doing something. 2, try to talk when you're in that room. Try to say at least one thing a day. 3, make sure you've read the writer's room notes the night before and be the person who, when somebody asks, what did we say? Remind everybody what you said. Try to be useful. Try to be helpful. Be kind and be nice. And be the first one there and the last one to leave. Always. That's what I think will help you. When I'm looking to hire somebody, I like to find people who not only have a real individual voice in their writing. So I don't want to read a spec script, which is just a script written for somebody else's show, meaning you can write in somebody else's voice. I want to read an original piece of writing. Sometimes it's an article, sometimes it's a play, sometimes it's a novel, sometimes it's a script. But I want it to be original. It has to be original. Not only do I want to read that and find out that you have an original voice, but I want people who aren't afraid of me. But not only are you supposed to be not afraid to express your opinion, you have to be willing to argue. You have to be willing to fight for your opinion. Because to me, a writer's room where everybody is in agreement all the time is not a writer's room. That's just me listening to the sound of my own voice. And that is boring. And I can't possibly be right all the time. That's, ugh. So I always want a room in which everybody has different opinions. Everyone's from sort of a different background. Everybody has different experiences, different ages, different everything. So that people can bring that to the table. I think a writer's room can be a very wonderful place to be, but I also think that there are so many mistakes that writers can make in writers' rooms that I've seen over the years that I think can really be detrimental to their career. You have a responsibility every evening to go home and come in having read the writer's room notes from the day before, to have some ideas about what you want to talk about the next day, even if it's not your episode that's being placed on the board to be discussed. If it is your episode, you cannot show up in the writer's room the next day with no new ideas or work. You really have to go home and come up with a bunch of new pitches, come up with a bunch of new ideas, having forwarded your story, have things to put on the board to fill it up that can be then discussed or changed or challenged, but you have to have done some work. Another danger in a writer's room can be someone who doesn't talk. You can come in to the writer's room, you can be a new writer, you're nervous, you want to do well, it's scary, everybody else has already been there or they're all more experienced than you. You walk into the writer's room, you sit down, and you don't say a word. Being a writer who doesn't talk in a writer's room is very dangerous, mainly because after a while, people forget you're there. Or worse, they start to think you're stupid. Or worse, they start to think you don't have anything to say. And once that happens, it's kind of over for you. If you've made it into that room, if you've been hired, you deserve to be there. Act like it. That's really important. I think another way that you can make a mistake in a writer's room is to talk too much. We get the writers who come in and they won't shut up at all. And nobody else gets a chance to talk. Nobody else gets a chance to have an idea. Nobody else gets a chance to have a thought because they're so busy telling everybody all of their amazing thoughts and ideas. That's a difficult one as well. That's also just deadly. It's always important to me to have somebody come into the room and they're going to talk about an episode or something that they want to do to be able to relate it to character. I cannot abide a pitch that comes into my room that is simply about plot. You have to tell me that a man's wife was kidnapped and he's devastated. And that devastation has led him to, this emotional breakdown. Where are the emotional stakes? What is emotional for him? What's going to be emotional for me? What's going to be emotional for the audience? I need it to come from character. I literally can't understand a pitch that doesn't have character involved in it because everything I write is about character. So to me, you really have to pitch from character. Writers' rooms have very different quirks. The etiquette really is if everybody has their seat in a writer's room, which some writers' rooms, everybody goes and they sit in the same place every single day, don't be the person who decides you're going to sit someplace else. It's deadly. It's just deadly. For some reason, people get really quirky about things like that. In our writers' rooms, if everybody eats lunch together, which a scandal, everybody eats lunch together, you can't be the person who doesn't want to eat lunch with everybody else. That always, feels weird to everybody. That person doesn't even eat lunch with us. If that's the vibe, you sort of have to fall into the culture. You have your personalities and it works. when you're writing a movie, what's wonderful is that for 364 days, you can think about writing your movie and then spend a couple of months writing your movie. With television, every 8 days, you need to produce a script. And if you're doing that for 22 episodes, every 8 days for 22 sets of 8 days or whatever, you have to produce a script. That is not a joke, and it must happen. You're in 8 days in prep, 8 days in shooting, 8 days in post-production, and it has to continuously happen, or else the trains stop, as we like to call it. And if the trains stop, production stops, and money keeps getting spent while everybody waits for you. It is a continuous race to keep ahead of production, to have scripts ready for people to shoot. And you have to have the ability to keep producing scripts and making something happen. Television, it's immediate, which is both terrifying and exciting. There's something really wonderful about the idea that I could have an idea like Olivia Pope gets kidnapped on a Monday, and by the next Monday, I'm sitting having a table read where Olivia Pope gets kidnapped, and by the next Monday, Olivia Pope's being kidnapped. You know, that's thrilling, but it is very immediate. The best thing anybody can do who works in television, if you get a show, is sit down with your line producer and be absolutely honest with them about what you know and what you don't know, and what you need from them. Say to them, I need to know when something's too expensive. I need to know when I'm doing something crazy. I need you to give me the fences to play within so that I can know what I'm doing. A lot of people don't do that, and the poor line producer is trapped with this sense of, I've got a crazy writer on my hands who doesn't know what they're doing, or who does know what they're doing and doesn't care how much money they're spending, because they're never quite sure. I personally feel like every writer who gets a show needs a line producer's boot camp, just to make sure that they know what they're doing and what's going on. A lot of writers have no production experience whatsoever, which is dangerous. I mean, it's the thing of where I say, a lot of writers walk into a set and don't understand how a set works. You have to walk into a set and understand how a set works. I'm irrelevant on a set because I don't have a job when I'm standing on set at all. I always say when I'm standing on a set, I'm the only person not working. But a lot of writers don't quite understand how that all works, and they need to. A set is not about the director, and a set is not about the actors. A set is about the crew. They're the ones running it. It's their set. They're the experts there, and everybody else is kind of the guest. Do you know what I mean? And it's really important that their work get the respect it deserves so that things can actually run smoothly and, frankly, look good, happen, be on time, work. In episodic television, the crew stays the same, the cast stays the same, the writers stay the same. What changes are the director and the guest stars, really. So basically, you become this really great family. It's kind of lovely to know all these people for so long and to get to work with everybody in this way. And in Shondaland, it becomes like one big Shondaland family. We have 5 crews right now, and that's fantastic. What is a showrunner? A showrunner is somebody who keeps a show running. They keep a television show running, and that is a very important way of putting it. And most of the time, a showrunner is a writer. Not necessarily always the creator of the show, but always an executive producer. And they're the person who's responsible for basically keeping the trains running on time. As I've gone along more, I've also tried to really learn how to empower the people under me, because I want them to all know how to run shows. I think leadership is really about making sure that the people who work with you and for you feel valued and feel like they are also getting opportunities. You know, in a lot of ways, leadership is about making sure that you are not working in a hero model where everything depends on you. So to me, making sure that everyone feels valued probably is the most important thing. I don't think think I ever really thought about the fact that there weren't many Black women writing television. I don't think I ever thought about it at all. I mean, I think growing up, the concept that there weren't any Black women doing television really came down to the fact that I didn't realize that this was a job. And part of that comes from the fact that it didn't seem like a job where there was access available to anybody but guys, white guys who knew other white guys in a lot of ways. It is a buddy system town in that sense. I am not a person who has ever felt uncomfortable in any room. I belong in any room that I enter, and I know that. And I think for a lot of women, for women of color as well, there is a sense of discomfort when you enter a room full of straight white men and you think to yourself, do I belong in this room? I'm the only person who's different in this room. Do I belong? It's never occurred to me that I don't belong. So that's been really helpful for me. And I think that's my favorite piece of advice to give anybody. Remember that you belong in any room that you enter. And if you don't feel like you truly belong, act like you belong. So now it's over. You've taken the whole class. You're done. You've gone through the whole thing. I'm hopeful that maybe you have a script out of it, or you're going to have a script out of it. What should you do now? Well, keep watching the class. Refer back to it every once in a while. Come back every time you have a new idea, a new script, a new question. Come back when you need to be inspired. Make sure that you keep writing. Remember what we've said. A writer writes every day. Remember what we talked about with dialogue. Whenever you're feeling stuck, come back and check out a class every once in a while. It helps. So I'm really glad you were here. I'm really glad you came. I'm really glad you spent time with us. I sort of can't believe that I got to have this opportunity to sit and talk to you and tell you about story and dialogue and character. It was really fun for me, much more fun than I even thought it would be, and I was excited to do it in the first place. Now, if you're feeling really good about everything, what you should be doing right now is turning me off, going to your computer, and sitting down to start writing immediately. I hope it works for you. I think you're going to find the stuff that you learned so useful. And frankly, I can't wait to see the television you produce because I look forward to watching it. Have fun.
So there you have it. That's Shonda Rhimes' masterclass in a nutshell. Sorry for the length of time. It was a lot, and I wanted to at least get some of the most important details in there. As I said in the beginning of the video, Kate and I will be doing a live stream discussion on what each of us got out of Shonda Rhimes' masterclass, and compare notes and answer any questions that anyone may have in the chat. That live stream will be this Thursday, May 5th, from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. my channel. So stay tuned, and if you like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, you will be notified of that upcoming live stream. With that said, that's going to be it for this video. If you like what you see and you want to see more videos from me, make sure that you hit the like and subscribe button. I post videos on Mondays and Thursdays, and I live stream on Wednesdays from 6 to 8 p.m. So if you hit that little notification bell, you'll be notified anytime I upload a new video or go live for some writing productivity sprints. Let me know in the comments if there's any questions that you have about the Shonda Rhimes class in particular that we can discuss during the live stream chat. Let me know in the comments so that I can set them aside for the live stream and get to your questions. If you have any suggestions for any other masterclasses you would like to see me take, also you can leave that in the comment section. As per usual, if you would like to support me in any of my creative endeavors, such as my blog site, my online magazine, my online store, and my Ko-fi page, all of those links can be found in the description box below. I will also link Kate's video. So if you haven't seen her video already, then you can head on over to her channel and see her video. And I hope to see you guys for the live stream discussion. And until next time, have a blessed day. Bye.